think recording. There we go. Cool.
All right, cool. Well, this is episode 3 of the Midwest Rehab Institute Clinical Leadership Podcast, and I'm really excited for our guest today. And so without further ado, we have Austin Einhorn here, and we're really excited to listen and learn from him. And he's got a couple of things brewing that he's doing out on the West Coast. And Austin, thanks for coming on the podcast. Like I said, just guest number 3, and we'll get into your background and stuff like that right now. But I just wanted to get into it, and just if you're not following this guy on social media and just listening to the way that he is expressing and articulating himself, I would highly encourage you to do so. And so we'll get your info and so people can follow you online lined up in a little bit here. But for starters, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day and joining us on the podcast here. And for those of our followers and listeners that don't know anything about you, if you could just take a minute or so and just tell us who you are and where you operate out of, and what some of your goals are.
Absolutely. I already know this is going to go quite well just from the few minutes we were speaking before you hit record, so I'm looking forward to it as well. I grew up in San Diego, and one of the gifts is, I had perfect weather year round. I joke that I actually didn't own any pants until I moved up into Northern California. It was a shorts only kind of kid, and played consistently year round all the time. You could even say I specialized in sports, but we can get into that as well. And now I'm in Santa Cruz. So how I got here is I followed a volleyball career as long as I could through college, and then briefly professionally in Germany. I was miserable, and I had put all my eggs in the volleyball basket. I thought I was going to play for 3 to 5 years professionally. I didn't have a plan B or plan C. This was the only thing that I was going to do, and that's what I prepared for most of college. I got there and I was miserable. I didn't have much technology to distract me, and so after I quit, I was on 15 to 18-hour train rides around Europe, exploring, but really just having this thought cloud my head. What the hell am I going to do next? I would be lying if I said my plan to play volleyball was to prolong this terrifying real world that you never know about until after you graduate. And all my friends were going back to some sort of graduate school, whether they're going to become a chiropractor, a therapist, a doctor, something. That's what they were all doing. So, growing up as a very social organism, we kind of assimilate to what everybody else is doing as our peers. And so I figure, I guess physical therapy would be the best choice for me, because I kind of had a mediocre experience when I got physical therapy in college. So I guess I'll do that. And once I moved back to the States, back to California, one of my friends offered me or told me to interview for this aide position at a physical therapy clinic. And I thought, great, this is the beginning of a career. I can start testing out if I want to do this thing. And a week or two in, it's not at all what I expected. And they even saw a fair amount of athletes. It was just not the environment I wanted, not the kind of practice that I did. Slowly after that, one of the bosses kind of saw that I was losing interest in this whole thing that I thought was going to be my next big shot at the real world. And he said, "Why don't you become a strength and conditioning specialist, SCSCS?" I'm like, what the hell is that? Hey, wait, that's a career? That's like something I can do to make a living and, call a career? He said, "Oh yeah, absolutely. Dive into that." So I stayed at the PT clinic, and I consider it in the past, looking back on it, somewhat of a paid internship. I was learning really useful stuff. I was getting some very valuable experience, but my heart was set on working more directly with athletes in a strength and conditioning type setting. I applied some of the stuff that I was learning from the therapy world to some of my athletes, and I was starting to get really cool results. I was using, you could say, cut my teeth with the dynamic neuromuscular stabilization model that follows really the first year of human life, developmental patterns, and that kinesiology. But it left me wanting more. I was doing things with athletes that I was getting great results, but I'm still not going to make them more powerful or more stronger. I might make them more efficient or allow them to reach their current power potential, but we won't be raising the bar. So then that started me looking towards other solutions that I could add and complement to this skill set. And then the next kind of big chapter is I thought if I perfected people's movement in the gym, then it would just naturally transfer over to their field of sport, whether it's on a field, on a court, in the water, whatever. And then my glass house came crashing down when I started watching my athletes play, and it was just like garbage movement. And I was like, what the hell have I been doing? It seems like I've been wasting time. They move perfectly in the gym, in my gym. Why aren't they doing well in sport? And so then that led me down towards the skill acquisition side of things. And now I'm one of the leaders in the field. And I just recently spoke, which you saw at the Sports Skill Movement Conference. Mouthful. It's every year now. It's fantastic. Wildly good information for anybody that's working with athletes or non-athletes. I think movement is a skill, and how humans learn skills is extremely important to know. All right, that brings us to today, basically, in a nutshell.
Awesome. And so what I didn't realize about you is that you are not a clinician.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a good thing. And one of the things we were talking about before you came on here is movement and play, and you've used the phrase play multiple times already today, and I see that as a theme in your videos and your content that you put out there, and that crosses the industries, physical therapists, massage, doesn't matter what industry you're in, movement and play has a very commonality, variability, but also commonality between it. And so I resonate deeply with you. I'm also, familiar and trained with dynamic neuromuscular stabilization. That's one of my clinical lens in which I look through patients and clients via assessment. So I'm right there with you on that. So tell me a little bit more about how you, because here I am, I thought you were a clinician. I thought that you were seeing these patients, and all of a sudden it looks like you're building out your garage, and you turn your garage into like, not just a man cave, but just something like just it is a garage, right? Or is it?
What you probably were seeing a few years ago was some shared space in a warehouse.
Okay.
Looks kind of like a garage gym. Now I have my own decent sized warehouse with some outdoor space.
Okay.
I call it an adult playground.
Yes.
Which sounds so terrible. But I ask my athletes to come in and play. I ask them what they want to do. I give them free time. I give them autonomy. Yes, I'm not a clinician. Some people, you might say, see me in replacement of one. I don't make any claims to be working on any injuries or even any sites of pain. Pain is, I think most of us these days know that if you're just chasing pain, that's really not going to lead you anywhere. It's quite mysterious in nature. So all I do is I assess and balance movement imbalances, or I check movement imbalances and try and balance things out based on my model, which has a lot of different components to it, but mainly evolution and what humans are supposed to do based on our design and purpose, and somewhat of what current evolutionary theory suggests. As far as the play component goes, I've been caught up in the past of I have to get results and I have to get them now. And that leads me towards more of a philosophy of scarcity. And I don't like that. And I don't think it's very conducive for health in any way. What I want to foster is intrinsic motivation. As long as me and the athlete continue to want to show up the next day, we'll figure it out, whatever it is. You keep losing with the desire to win, to keep practicing, eventually you'll figure out how to win. So I'm not trying to put big expectations on myself or my athletes that, oh yeah, I'm going to fix you in 1 hour, and, and you're going to get a great value and all that. It's like, we're going to work on this, and we're going to work on this consistently, whether it's you're not scoring enough touchdowns, whether you don't feel like you can run left equally as you can run right, whether your shoulder's bothering you for whatever reason. We're going to work on it. That's going to be a theme that we're going to go towards. Whenever we get there is when we get there. But I want you to continue to want to show up and come back in the gym and actually enjoy training, enjoy practice. Reflecting back on my professional career is a thing that I do often as I work with pro athletes and soon to be pro athletes. And part of the reason why I quit is I started hating it. I didn't realize I was miserable playing volleyball until afterwards, years afterwards. I would score a really big point, something that would like drive the momentum of the crowd of their team. And I would look at them and be like, yeah, so what? I don't really care. Like, that's whatever. I scored a point. Who cares? And I see that happening all too often. And that's the last thing that I want for anybody who's playing for their career. We're not really, we're bastardizing the definition of playing a game. And this culture is revolving around making things a grind and miserable, and it has to be hard and it has to be difficult. And I think that's bullshit. Am I allowed to cuss?
Yeah, we'll just go ahead and put the E next to this episode. No problem.
Okay. So part of my philosophy is that if you believe it's going to be hard, it will be. And if you believe that, you're going to be closed off to any sort of easy solutions that might come your way. Your beliefs, if you look into some of the philosophy and even some of the quantum physics of consciousness, your beliefs construct your reality at a fundamental level. And so if you believe it has to be hard, if you believe David Goggins is your spirit animal and you're going to channel his spirit and do everything at 4:30 a.m. and as hard as you fucking can, well, then you're going to do that. And you will, to me, that seems pretty miserable. I'd rather take the easy path to success if it's easy, or if it's hard, I don't really care. I'd rather get the result that we want and enjoy it along the way. If you enjoy waking up at 4:30 a.m. and decreasing your sleep and some of your health and grinding yourself into the ground, I'm not going to judge you. I just think the research would, state otherwise.
I do get up that early.
I'm sorry.
No, you know what? It serves as a good reminder, because for probably about 2 years now, I would say my most productive hour of the day is about 4:30 to 5:30. My wife and I, we have 4 wonderful kids, and our oldest, actually, she's 8 right now. She does get up, between 6 and 6:20. And when kids are up, they're awake, and she's going 100 miles an hour. So I try to get 1 hour of uninterrupted solid work. So that's and I know my health has everything that you just said, I'm guilty of, and I'm well aware of that.
But you're doing it, I would say there's a little caveat with you. You have other responsibilities. There's this idea that you have to wake up for 4:30 just for waking up at 4:30 for a lot of people who don't have the responsibilities. I personally, I'll wake up at 5:30, but I wake up quite naturally. I go to bed really early. But from 5:30 to 7:30 or 8 is some of my favorite times of day. Nobody else is up. I don't hear street traffic. My phone is usually in the other room, but still nobody is texting me. I don't hear a phantom vibration. I just know this is my time. That's when I do most of my writing and editing for my book. We'll get to that later.
Yeah. Yes, we will.
But what I want to make clear is I think you're understanding that you're doing it willingly and you're doing it because you have other responsibilities. The David Goggins type is doing it just to do it, just because it's hard, because you think you're going to get better because you're waking up at 4:30 instead of sleeping in when you could sleep in. You see the difference there?
Yeah. Thanks for bailing me out there. I appreciate that. That's good.
No, I'm not trying to bail you out. I'm trying to say, like, if I was in your situation, I would probably do something quite similar. Some of the people I've looked up to and learned a lot from do a similar schedule because they do have kids. And so that's the sacrifice some people make.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the insights too. And I resonate with that. I don't think that just doing something hard and focusing on the grind as just like in our clinical practice as a chiropractor and physical therapist could be guilty of the same thing, which is making things as difficult as they want them to be instead of focusing on the outcome. And we say something else in the coaching world. I coach high school soccer as well. And one thing we try to coach the high schoolers is with a few phrases just repeated over and over again to try to relay a bigger picture. And that is to focus on the beauty of the process. Don't focus on like the little tiny detail. Focus on, have your eyes set on the outcome and the process itself. Not that you have to endure through it, but it can be a beautiful thing. So we try to share with them the beauty of the process is something that we say over and over again.
Can we dig into that a little bit? What is the process?
So the process in that stage, in that day, in that 14 to 18 mindset, we have a short window to take a high schooler and take all of their feats, all of their accomplishments, all of their skills, and try to shape them into something that the college setting would want. Or maybe that's not something that has to do with sport at all in college. Maybe it just has to be with some type of other responsibility. And we don't want people to shy away from difficulties. We want them to actually, instead of doing a 180 when life gets hard, we want them to endure some type of challenge. And sport, we feel like, reveals a little bit of that difficulty, because your opponent's going to show up no matter what, and they're not going to just give you a victory. Like, and even if they would just give it to you, we wouldn't want to just take it. We want to teach these kids that, plan, prepare, and enjoy the process, because we feel that there are going to be other ways that you can exemplify that outside of the sport. Does that make sense? Did I try to word that?
Yeah. This is something that's really popular in culture right now, right? It's popping up more and more these days. Oh, focus on the process. And what I'm curious of is, how do people define the process? How does it differ? Or is it just this term that's getting thrown around all the time? People talk about, oh, this is a process day, I'm focusing on the process. I'm like, well, what is your process? What is that? Or are you just saying that because today didn't go your way, you didn't get the result you wanted, so you're then talking about, oh, it's a process day?
Yeah. No, I think it could be easy, and you bring up a good point. It could be an easy fallback, option to just kind of chalk it up as, yeah, you're right, this is a process day. But I in parenting, in clinical work, I try to focus on the outcome and enjoy the process. Hopefully, enjoy the process along the way. So I'm maybe more of an outcome mindset individual. But I do appreciate like just a different perspective and questioning. And so I'm wondering, is this, and you mentioned your book earlier, so is this something that you're going to touch on in your book?
Yeah.
So what is your book about?
The title is called Movement Banking, and it's about how to have sustainable health and performance year round, throughout your whole life, really. And I'll try not to give too much of it away. But essentially, the way things are looking, we are headed for a plague of injury on biblical proportions. There's been more and more research showing that there's critical stages of tissue development that end right around puberty. And when 2/3 of the youth's life is spent sedentary, and I'm talking about sleep and then school, you have a very small window to build up any sort of tissue capacity for the remaining 3/4 or 75% of your life. So when we're talking about connective tissue, muscle, bone, let's just leave it at those three. Those windows end right around puberty. So, even though there's a decent amount of research growing about eccentric training and isometric training for loading connective tissue in adults, the majority of the cellular turnover ends, the research says 17. But if you look at 17 and examine that's a human invention. Chronological age is a human invention. So what happens more often at 17 is it's kind of the end of puberty. So most likely when the hormone changes hit another milestone, then we start seeing another level of adaptation, or adaptation really stop, and we move into a maintenance phase for the rest of your life. And that makes complete sense on an evolutionary scale. Well, the adult life that you're going to live is probably going to be, well, how do you prepare for it as a kid? And with this is, we can dive into specialization with this as well. Part of the reason that specialization is getting really bad reputation is because practice sucks. Like I watch kids practice on Instagram, and I watch them practice in life. And well, it's not really sport. It's, let's dance around these cones because coach thinks he knows better, and he saw the Barcelona soccer team doing it, and he paid $300 to go to this coaching clinic, and they said, oh yeah, you do these things because of this impressive reason, and you're removing the variability from playing one sport. We have plenty of examples of specialization working and working really well. So I think specialization is getting really bad reputation. I'm not going for it, but people can specialize safely. I played soccer up until 14, only one sport, and then I moved to volleyball, but pretty much only one sport. However, I had many other physical activities. I was always skateboarding, I was BMX biking. I had jumping as basically a hobby of mine, where I would see how many stairs I could jump up, jump down. I jumped off the roof of my house, all sorts of jumping activities. And so those things balanced out what you could think of as the specialization overuse injuries of repeating the same movement over and over and over again. So I think what we're going to see is that it's not that bad if people balance it out with other things. The really problematic thing is specialization with affluence. Kids go from soccer practice, or from school to soccer practice, and they're always being told what to do, and they never get any freedom to just play. So that's part of it. The other part I talk about, school and how that needs to change. In particular, we're asking for cognitive skills without the means to do so. Our brain exists because we have a body, and not the other way around. And only things that move and move with somewhat of complexity have brains. There's Daniel Wolpert is the main researcher with this, but he's shared a story, a wonderful TED Talk, how there's some sort of amphibious animal that will move in its first part of life, then attach to coral and stop moving and digest its own brain for resources. Then it becomes more or less like a plant. And so we're expecting school to really lead towards some sort of good life. We have to get good grades so we can get into a good college, so that we can get a good degree, so that we can get a good job, so that we can have a good life, and without ever having a good life along the way. 75% of college graduates don't get a job in what they major in. I just saw something else the other day where only 45-ish% of science, technology, and math graduates regret their degree. Others is in the 60 to 70% ratio of people who regret their degree. So this school thing is not doing as advertised, and I think we're nearing a point where it'll change.
That's really interesting. I think it'll be an interesting book. When does it come out?
No promises. I've given myself a deadline I've been working on it for a year. I'm saying year maximum, maybe the next few months. We'll see.
Okay. So how does your thought process on school, and how does your thought process on movement and what you were just talking about in regards to the brain and the body, how does that play a role or play a part in some of these creative movements that you have some of your clients do?
So hold on. So I'm trying to understand your question. How does school and movement and brain?
How does your view, like basically what are some of your principles that you are going to outline in your book? How does that manifest, or how does that translate into some of the creative exercises that you give your clients?
Okay, I think I know where to go with this. I get it. So I've been gifted with an ability to get bored really fast and really easily.
Okay.
Um, and so while I'll be doing something, I get bored. I'm like, okay, what's something I can change with this? How can I inject more novelty? And so if you've been following my account for quite some time, you rarely see things get repeated. And a lot of my athletes would attest to that, that they rarely will do the same thing that they were doing last year or even 6 months ago. I'm trying to evolve quite quickly, as well as inject interesting and novel movement problems for their brain to solve. An analogy here would be, so most practitioners who help people with moving their body in any way ask them to drive their car on a straight and narrow road, and then anytime they drive outside of the lines, they say, no, 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 don't do that. You got to do this. And by the very definition of asking them to drive on a straight and narrow road, they know they drove outside the lines. What I'm trying to do is say, hey, you know how to drive straight forward, but can you drive on snow? Can you drive with a curve? Can you drive around a left curve and then a right curve? What about a loop-de-loop? And can you do it in any weather terrain? What about without oxygen? What about if we change your breathing only through your nose or just through your mouth? What if we do it with one eye open or one eye or both eyes closed? What if we did it upside down? What if we did it sideways? And so a lot of the same movement, I'll ask people to use kinesiology terms. I might ask people to say work on some sort of shoulder flexion pattern, and I'll ask them to do it standing, and then we'll do it supine. I'll ask them to do it where they're pressing versus hanging, um, and almost always they will be climbing in some regard, climbing and swinging.
And you have all that set up in your warehouse, facility as well.
Yeah, I'm probably the only, you could say, sports performance center with a pretty good bouldering, climbing gym setup within it.
Yeah, I just see that and I think I've got to take our son over there because he climbs on everything. And climbing is one of those primitive, patterns that, or maybe not primitive, but it's one of those primal patterns that were, and you could probably speak more of that than I can, but like I can just tell that climbing is one of those movements that especially kids, but we lose that definitely as we age, correct?
Yes. So to dig into that, this is a presentation I gave at Altis in Arizona. It's spelled ALTIS. Highly recommend their facility and their online learning content, especially if you're going to watch my presentation.
Oh, of course.
Um, Eventually, I'll have some written material for this, but I have to finish my current book. So I've discovered that compensatory patterns follow a predictable pattern with movement evolution. So we have primarily amphibious locomotion, then quadrupedal on land motion, and then bipedal upright motion. And so that's all based on the organism needing to accomplish certain goals on land with gravity. And those four main goals have been, for pretty much all of time, feeding, fighting, fleeing, and fucking. Those have been the main things to drive movement for millions and millions of years. And now we worship a ball, and that drives our movement. So when humans, upright humans, you could say that the most avant-garde of movement movers on Earth, uh, do not have overhead stimuli. When we do not have stimuli to upright our spine, we devolve in a predictable manner towards quadrupedal or aquatic movement patterns. And with that, we lose 3 planes of motion to primarily 2 planes, maybe even down to 1 plane of motion. And so to further talk about overhead motion, the rotator cuff is terribly named. I wish it was changed, because that's not it's not as accurate. The rotator cuff doesn't show up in primates until we start seeing overhead movement, when apes and other primates are climbing and swinging from trees. And so in normal therapy cultures, rotator cuff exercises are below the head and rote and robotic, where it's just internal rotation, external rotation. Okay, let's change your arm angle. Internal rotation, external rotation. Oh, and God forbid, do not let go of your shoulder blade. It has to be pinched close to your spine, because, well, it'll just fall off. It'll fall off if it's not pinched towards your spine. Clearly, we have just evolved with such immense flaws, and we're so fragile that we have to keep our shoulder blades pinched together to do anything with our hands. How did we ever make it to 2019 without pinching our shoulder blades together? You can tell I'm very passionate about this. So once I've made this somewhat of discovery and found other people's research that influenced this line of movement evolution, there's absolutely no way I wasn't going to put a rock climbing gym in my facility and ask people to climb and swing and do things that, well, they probably never have done in their entire life, that we are designed to do.
Well, it also looks like fun. So it looks like the people that are going, well, challenging but fun. You know, I can't help but watch a video and think, man, I want to try that. You know, and so there's definitely some novelty to it because you can always mix up the pattern. And I think, you know, from my understanding on skill acquisition, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're constantly giving someone the same stimulus, the same exercise, their learning curve is just on the first rep or two or three maybe. But if you're giving someone like a variable exercise where there is no set rep scheme, it is just constant variation, they're going to be learning and acquiring new skill on each rep. If I'm recalling one of the books on motor, you know, motor or skill acquisition, so I'm sure you can attest to more of that. But it seems like what I do, and I'm definitely guilty of this in rehab and in therapy, is okay, well, we're going to do 3 sets of 10 of that. Okay, that felt good. Let's do 3 sets of 10. And it's guys like you that have got me thinking, okay, am I doing the maximum amount for this given patient or this given client by giving them those types of parameters? And I think this is the type of topic that keeps me up at night, because I know that it's easy and it reduces my cognitive abilities to just say, okay, yep, 3 sets of 10, go do it. And then I can distance myself from that. But if I really want to think critically, I'm guilty of not providing enough of an environment, in which case things like what you're talking about with the rotator cuff get challenged, get stressed, and then they adapt and they hopefully learn a couple of skills. So I definitely can resonate with what you're trying to do. I practice in a similar way. How long are your appointments with you? Or is there no time frame on that?
The second one. There is occasionally a time frame, but I like things to be somewhat open-ended. I will have a maximum time for certain clients. So based on who they are, I then, over the first few sessions, understand, okay, right now just an hour isn't appropriate. Okay, for this client, we need about 2.5 hours. That being said, I'm totally willing to call it early. So since you talked about some, say, business practices, what I wanted to get away from also is the idea that they're paying for time. You're not paying for your time or for time training. That's a quantitative model, and that's not something that I'm about. I'm about quality. And so we're about getting these results that you want to have, achieving these goals. I don't care how long it takes. This is the maximum allotted time of physiological stress we can do for you today. If we get that sooner, you're done. You're out of here. I think of exercise and sport somewhat of as a poison. I don't want to overdo it. I want the minimal effective doses of stress so that they can get to recovering. Every athlete today is overtrained and under-recovered, and most humans are as well. Most athletic humans are overtraining and under-recovered. So where do I want to go with this? I forget where that was going, but another topic that you brought up is climbing is fun. So this is somewhat, I have a very evil devil's advocate in my head. That being said, whereas we want a minimal effect of dosage of stress, because climbing and some of the things that I do are so fun, I don't give them any limit. I say, go complete this route. And with certain intrinsically motivated athletes, they get on the wall and they try it and they can't do it. And then that fuels the fire so much more, and they keep going and they keep going and they keep going. And you get a sort of stress adaptation stimulus that you don't get in a normal clinic or gym type setting. It's a type of stimulus that you typically only get within sport. And that's the greatest adaptation anybody's going to incur, is that recurrent, intrinsically motivated activity that is sport. Can I get more of that in the gym so that we get a better adaptation, we get the results faster, and we enjoy it along the way?
That's really interesting, because I know, based on personal experience, which I know it's empirical, it's my own experience, like I said, but I had a knee. I played soccer in college as well. I had a knee injury, and I was so driven to come back. They said, you're going to be out for 6 weeks. And I said, okay. And I marked it on my calendar, and I knew, like, on 6 weeks from then, I'm going to be stepping back out on to the field. And I did. And I had this brace on, and I felt like I was intrinsically, I was back to how I was before the injury. So maybe I was in a little bit of denial. And I actually played in a game, and parents, my roommates' parents were there. And I'll never forget this, but the dad walked up and said, you shouldn't be playing. And I was like, well, I just rehabbed. I just did 6 weeks. We're good to go. And he's like, this is not you. Like, you're not the same. And we can tell. And I'm like, gosh, if supporters on the sidelines can tell, maybe this is really a problem. And I remember thinking through that, saying, like, well, I did everything. I got full range of motion back. But what I also remember was, the minute I stepped out onto the field, I had this moment where I thought, oh, I'm not ready, but I'm on the field, so I might as well give it a go.
Mm.
And so I agree with you in that we don't really scratch the surface with the athletes that we're working with that we think we do. That's a universal we. I mean, I'm guilty of it, but I'm looking at myself in and amongst our culture of providers, because no matter what we're trying to do, we can't, maybe you can correct me, but we can't exactly replicate a competition or a sport environment, correct?
Almost never.
Yeah.
Almost never. It's too chaotic. And that's just the physiological stress side of things. So if we want to take a little detour into some skill acquisition, one of the biggest misunderstandings that is going on through this movement culture with all sorts of clinicians and practitioners of sorts is, okay, they're moving similar and it's specific to what we would see in a game, therefore it will show up. But that is the effect, not the cause. The cause is the perceptual information that a ball coming towards them, an opponent coming towards them, something about the game forced them to move that way. And then their body shows what's the most efficient way to do that. And sometimes it's not conducive for knee health or shoulder health. And so when you see me on the field with any of my athletes or on a volleyball court, what I'm trying to do is meld those two worlds where, okay, I have some knowledge about how the body is designed to move, and I have some knowledge about the perceptual information that will trigger certain things to happen. How do I meld these two worlds of, okay, for you to jump your max for the rest of your life, when the ball's in the air, your knee needs to be here. And so we need to, I don't like using this term, but bridge the gap of perception, where they need to be able to see the ball and feel their knee collapse in and start making a conscious change until it becomes unconscious. I'm a fan of the conscious competence ladder because I haven't found anything better yet. It also resembles a lot of other skills. For instance, driving stick shift car. First time you try and do it, it's extremely cognitive. It's a big cognitive labor. And now, for me, I drive a stick shift car every day. I can do it and drive with my knees and text and eat. Not that I do that,
Sure.
but I could. Never do that. Definitely not.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
good. This is really good, and I definitely want to learn more in the skill acquisition. So, is there any books or resources you would recommend myself and our listeners to dive into for skill acquisition info?
No, because it's torturous. It's so terribly worded. Eventually, something that I write. I don't recommend it, but if you wanted to look for stuff, just know it. Oh, God, I just don't like how it's written. I'm sorry. It's NonLinear skill acquisition NonLinear Pedagogy and Skill Acquisition, I believe is the title. There's like 5 different authors. Yeah, it has a picture of kids playing on the front and kind of red.
Yeah, I think I've seen that one floating around. I'll definitely look it up and put a link in the show notes. But that's one book. Go ahead.
I would start with that one. A friend of mine, his name's Sean Mishka, has given some pretty good speeches. He's probably more passionate than I am about this stuff. You can find that if you Google Sport Movement Skill Conference, you might get a video of him. He also has 4 or 5 lectures on the Altus 360 online platform.
Yeah, we'll definitely include links to all that in the show notes, and on our emails out to our, like I said, I joked, our 12 listeners. We'll make sure that we get them all this info.
Hey, maybe you get some more after me. I'll see what I can do.
That'd be great. In regards to outside of skill acquisition and just life, like I said, I'm a big fan of the way that you think and the way that you analyze and critically assess, movement and play. What is a book that you would recommend that we either listen to on Audible or we just dig into and highlight and dive into?
I read a lot, so this is a really hard question. There's 2 books that I read every year. They're my 2 favorite books. They're not specifically towards sport or leadership or anything.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's Robert Pirsig's two books, Zen and Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is the first one. The lesser known but better sequel, in my opinion, is called Lila. And it dissects a lot of philosophical nature and quality as a topic of what is quality. Specifically in Lila, he breaks down a lot of really useful patterns of life. What are these patterns that we see all around us? And specifically, there's 5, and they increase in evolutionary order from inorganic patterns, the things that keep you in the chair, and the water in my cup. And then there's biological patterns, the patterns that keep us as one organism instead of expanding out into all the random elements that we are. Then there's social patterns, the patterns that keep a team together or a nation together. Then there's intellectual patterns. I'd say what we're doing today is an intellectual pattern, a podcast about learning, becoming better, moving, clinicians, leadership. And then there's art. Art, it would be a dynamic quality, which is play, it's invention, it's creativity, it's kind of that razor's edge of existence, where there's a line within that book that I love where dynamic quality is that moment where a baby looks at its hand not knowing exactly what it is. It doesn't have the intellectual construct or the concept of what it is. It just looks at its hand without having any predetermined ideas. And that's the way I try to look at the body. It's so easy for us to fall into biases. We have 188 known cognitive biases, and I fall into them all the time.
What are those, by the way, the 188 numbers?
I got a list right here. How much time you got? I got it right next to my desk.
We'll have you back on, and we'll go through probably the top 10 most commonly, violated. It's kind of a strong word, but maybe we'll have you come on, you're back on the podcast down the road, and you can pick out the top 10 that you've recognized.
Sure.
That'll be a good episode. That'd be really cool. But keep going. Interrupted you.
Another book that I really like that's more related to sports and leadership is Captain's Class. It's a wonderful book. It's not as popular as it should be. It's written really well. There's so many amazing stories, and it sheds some maybe unfavorable truths on what it takes to be a leader, because Michael Jordan is touted as the greatest basketball player of all time, and the Bulls would have been nothing without him. Well, there's some evidence that the Bulls were better without him, and that he was like the anti-leader. He was a really bad leader. And Kobe is not even mentioned in this book. It's these leaders are people, well, they're quite inspirational of who they are and who they are now after sports. My favorite guy is Carlos Puyol. He played for, you probably know who he is.
Yeah.
Not only was he a fearless leader on the field that I think Barcelona lacks currently, and that's why they choked in the Champions League semifinal. He knows how to retire and still live his life. If you follow him on social media, he's a retired athlete, but he's still playing. He still plays soccer for fun. He plays paddleball. He plays basketball. He runs. Like he's living a great life, a life that I wish more retired athletes would live, where they still have play as a part of their life.
Yeah, I think you might have been one of the few people put that book up on social media that they were going through, and so I did read through that book, and I passed along to a couple of coaches that I know, and we all kind of have the same vibe, the same feeling that you do in reading that book. So we highly recommend. That is a book that I've been purchasing and lending off to some people because it is. What do you say? Like, you wish it was more popular than it is. I totally agree with that, and I appreciate your insights to Carlos Puyol. And I'm a big Liverpool fan, so I was ecstatic.
Oh,
Yeah, I was glad. You know, when they came back to Anfield, I thought, man, and I texted a couple of my friends the day of, and I thought, just wait, it's another amazing Anfield European night. You know, it's going to happen. And then it happened, and I thought, well, not really one person on Barcelona that night showed up to play.
Vidal did. I thought Vidal did.
He did. You're right. I take that back. He was, and you could tell that he knew it was slipping away versus others just thought, no, it's fine. We have a 3 goal. Okay, now we have a 2 goal advantage. Okay, we still are up on goal different. And it was, it was great for me to watch. I was alone in our clinic here, just on my knees, hands in the air, fist. That would have been a sight to see. But hey, last question for you before we go. Maybe I have one more question. Do you say your company name apperos or apperos or what? How do you say that?
I say apperos.
Apperos.
One of my athletes played professionally in Greece for a while. Apperos is ancient Greek for limitless or without end.
I was going to ask. You know, I've Googled it. Nothing really comes up if you Google it.
I had to do some digging.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
he said in Greek it would probably be pronounced apperos.
Okay.
But I call it apperos.
Okay. So how would someone go about, you know, scheduling one of these 2.5 hour to 3 day movement sessions with you?
Well, you contact me. We have a little interview. We see if things work out well between you and I, or I might refer you to another one of my colleagues, and then we'd make magic happen.
Awesome. Well, do you have any parting advice for our listeners on movement, skill acquisition, or just it could be even like a motivating quote that's had you going through your book to keep you going?
Who's the main audience for you? That'll help me narrow things down.
I'd probably say it's a mixture of strength and conditioning professionals, chiros, physical therapists. We're a mixture of people that either own and operate their own facility, or they have aspirations to someday run their own clinic or gym. So this is for someone who might want to do things a little bit differently, and you definitely do things a little bit differently. If I went down the street to the 3 other chiropractors in my area and I suggested that they do a 2.5 hour appointment, they would laugh me out of there. Like there's no way they're going to do that. The longest appointment I've had was about 2.5 hours, and time was irrelevant, and I didn't even realize that we were going as deep into it. But there were just so many layers that needed to be unpacked. And plus, if you ask some really good, what I call calibrated questions, I'm never going to interrupt a client or a patient if they're really shedding some really important clinical information. And so, that one, I think 2.5 hours is the longest one I've ever had. But getting back to you here, what's something you could leave for our audience? No pressure, putting you on the spot here.
I can handle under pressure.
All right.
I'm looking over the questions you sent and seeing if there's anything that I really want to tackle.
I appreciate the flexibility because we could go down a rabbit hole on any one of these questions, you know? So it
Yeah.
can be as structured or as unstructured as we want it to be.
So I would say to those, I'll say two things. To those of you who are a little scared about going out on your own and you're not sure if it's going to work, do it. You'll make it work. You can do it. You know, pretty consistently, almost everybody underestimates what they can do. And if you overestimate, then you calibrate. Humans are the most adaptable things on the planet. As long as you keep showing up, keep trying, you're going to do what you set out to do. You make a mistake, you own it. And this will lend into my next point, or steer that way. When someone goes through some successful period, especially athletes maybe are most guilty for this. They take credit for it. A team, an athlete loses a game. We just didn't play our game today. We were just tired. We traveled. Instead of taking credit for the losses as well. I'm a big fan of that kind of ownership. You take responsibility for the credits and the losses. So a lot of my athletes will maybe start complaining about something, or maybe a contract issue with a team or whatever, thinking that they're the victim. And I would like to change that role over and say, how are you responsible for this? How did you create this for yourself? And whether it's true or not, you're still going to come up with some pretty good answers. If you sit down with that and really kind of dig deep into you might realize, oh, I did put this on myself because, well, how would the manager value me if I don't value me? And that's why they don't value me, you know? So it's something I'm a big fan of. And I think the world would be a little bit better place if people did that more often.
Well, Austin, it's been a pleasure, to say the least, to have you on the podcast today. I appreciate your insights and your motivation. Like I feel like I'm definitely better off, having gone through this and observing and learning from your material. And we'll check out some of those videos online, some of the past conference talks that you've given. You put little snippets up online. We'll keep an eye out for those. That we love when you put those out. If you're ever speaking anywhere in the future, let us know and we'll be able to promote and put some stuff out there for you. And maybe one day I'll try to convince you to come out to Chicagoland and put something on, put an event on out here for our trainers, clients, coaches as well, along with medical providers. I think that the narratives that you're preaching and sharing with your clients, I think that there's more people out there that would resonate with you, not just with how I am, but with other people as well. So again, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day to come on here, and we'll have you on again because I'd love to go through some of those cognitive biases. I think that would make for a great show. So this will be part 1 and we'll do part 2 down the road. Okay.
Fantastic. I'd love that.
Cool. Thanks again.